was really scary. Actually, the first time that happened was when I was about 14. I was in a pool, and I remember swimming, and all of a sudden I felt like I was drowning, like I couldn't breathe anymore. And all of a sudden just blood just started gushing out of my lungs. It was the first time it ever happened.
Think of trauma in terms of a weight that you carry around. So if somebody's carrying around 150 pounds in a backpack on their back, which is all this trauma, and then somebody comes along and says, here's another 10 pounds, right?
Right.
That could feel like 1,000 pounds at that point.
And now you're saving so many lives, right? All these beautiful stories of all of these people that have, been searching and searching for answers for so long.
Yep.
And suffering. There's so many people suffering out there with trauma, unresolved trauma, when there's actual help out there.
Welcome to my podcast, You Must Be Out of Your Mind.
So welcome to the very first You Must Be Out of Your Mind podcast. My name is Dr. Don Wood, and I'm going to be your host for this series on how trauma and performance are combined and how we can actually remove the effects of trauma to increase performance. You've probably heard me on a number of podcasts. I've been on quite a few podcasts talking about the science, educating people on what is going on, how the brain and how the mind work, how trauma is affecting that. And so our brilliant marketing PR firm decided that instead of having me on the other side of the camera, this time they're going to put me on the host side of the camera. So I'm going to be bringing in some really cool guests. I think you'll really enjoy it. They may be coming in from not necessarily doing what I do, but somehow we'll tie in the brain and the mind into that conversation. So this is the very first inaugural podcast. I'm really excited to be here with you. I think when we've done the podcast before with other people, they've generally been fairly high rated. So it's something that people are interested in, and I'm hoping that we can provide some insight and some new information to you if you're dealing with anxiety or panic attacks, depression, post-traumatic stress. The program that I developed is called TIPP, T-I-P-P, the Inspired Performance Program. And it was designed to help eliminate and reduce the effects of trauma. And trauma doesn't always have to be big T trauma. I wrote a second book I called Emotional Concussions. They could be coming from the teacher, the coach, the parent that maybe said something that hurt you, had an effect on you when you were much younger. Those emotional concussions can also build up. So this whole podcast is going to be going all around talking about how those kinds of either emotional concussions or those big T traumas have an effect on us. And so, when we thought, who's going to come on to be our first guest? And it was obvious. The person who was going to be our first guest was the person who inspired and launched this entire Inspired Performance Program. She's responsible for it, and we're going to bring her in and talk about it, and she's going to share with you what motivated me to start getting behind this and start to work on a program. So it is my absolute pleasure to bring on our very first guest, and one of my most favorite people in the world, definitely my most favorite daughter, right? She's my only daughter, but she's definitely my favorite daughter. So I want to bring in my daughter, Ashley Ann Wood. Hey, Ashley.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. How are you?
Good.
So the inaugural one, you're here for the first one,
I
right?
feel so special.
Well, you launched it all, right?
Yes.
So that's what we want to talk about. We want to share your story and really what inspires so many people, because when I'm on these podcasts, so many people will say, that's me, or that's my daughter, or that's my relative, that's my wife, right? So your story relates to so many people. So that's why I thought this is perfect to have you on and share it for the first time. I talk about you all the time, and now people actually get to see her. So I'm really excited to be able to do this, and so it's an honor to be with you.
Well, it's an honor to be here.
Very good. So if you've heard me on other podcasts, I talk about the story. And if you haven't heard the story yet, I'll sort of share a little bit of it. The program was really developed because of my experience as a child and Ashley's experience and my wife Bridget's experience as children. We had very different lives. My life, and your grandma and grandpa, right?
Yeah.
Were extremely amazing people.
They were the most amazing people ever.
Weren't they? They were incredible. They never argued, never fought, kept my nervous system in regulation all the time.
Yeah.
And so I was living in this really idyllic childhood with parents that nurtured, loved, took care of us, and never yelled, never argued. So there was no real tension in our home. And that's not true. I thought everybody had that home. I didn't know that my friends were not living in that house.
Right.
You know, that they had a lot of dysfunction going on in their homes. So I played hockey, so I didn't get bullied or picked on. I could defend myself. So I sort of just skated through my childhood, right? Without any real kind of major trauma. I got bumped here and there, you know, with a friend that maybe said something or a coach that said something. But as soon as I came home, my nervous system came back into regulation.
Right.
And so I could expand and come back very easily. And I never had any big T trauma. And so it wasn't until I met your mom, right, that I discovered that she was not living in my world.
Complete opposite world.
Complete opposite world. A lot of trauma, a very violent, angry father that just ruled the house with fear. And so she was always living in fear. And it didn't matter what I did. I thought, well, when we get married, this is all going to change. She's going to be living in my world, similar to what I grew up in.
Right.
And all of that would calm down. But it didn't calm down because the trauma that she experienced as a child was continuing to loop. And we're going to talk about that on what happened with her. And we're going to also relate it to your story.
Right.
And so, you know, your mom was a high-functioning mom, a high-functioning wife. Nobody would have known that she was dealing with all.
Mom.
Yep, no one would have known. Amazing dad too, right?
Oh, most incredible dad ever.
All right, perfect. I just want to make sure I got that in. So she was living in my world, but still living in fear.
Yeah.
And no matter how I said it, how I changed my words, how I paced it, I could still activate her nervous system.
Right.
And one of the things you're going to hear me say all the time on these podcasts is I never talk about triggers. Because people say
Why is
that triggers all the time. Yeah, great question.
Yeah.
Is because trigger sounds violent and sounds like your mind is doing something that's not for your benefit.
Right.
It's actually activating your nervous system. It's not triggering it, right? So trigger just sounds negative.
Right.
And when you hear people say, oh, that's my trigger, you can feel the tension in them when they think about it.
Right.
And what I say is when people come in and say, I have anxiety or I have depression or I have post-traumatic stress, what I say is that's the symptom. That is what's happening because your system got activated.
Right.
So let's go to the root cause and find out what is activating your nervous system. And so when you were growing up, right, you were the happiest child. You smiled all the time. I mean, nobody ever had any idea that there was anything going on for you that we were unaware of.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so tell us what happened to you when you were 14 as you were diagnosed with Crohn's, right?
Right.
So tell us a little bit about what that experience was.
I think it was, I was about 14 years old. I started getting like really, really bad pains in my stomach. I just remember being sick all the time and I couldn't eat. And we
constantly had ear infections, throat.
Yeah.
You were constantly having all these different infections all the time, right?
I was constantly sick as a child too, right?
Yes.
Wasn't I? So I was constantly getting medication and all this kind of stuff. I think antibiotics.
Constantly.
All the time. And I think it was because of I was going through trauma as a child, you know, that you guys didn't know of as well. That I was, if we go through trauma as a child, we hide that from our parents, right? And we don't want anyone to know because we think that maybe it's our fault or something like that, right? So, but I finally opened up about that when at like 14 years old.
I think you're about 16 when you disclosed it to us. So it was after the Crohn's, and then you're about 16, you disclosed to us what happened.
Right.
And we were devastated. I mean, literally devastated.
Yeah.
Because, especially mom, she was like, I thought I could protect my children, right? That this could never happen, right? So she was really, and it's interesting because...
But it's not parents' fault, right?
It's not. But, as a parent, you take it on.
Yeah.
But the thing that's really interesting, and I never really ever thought about it before, but I talk about my childhood with no trauma. And when I think about people say, that was my trauma.
Right.
Was you.
Right.
Right? Getting sick, right? Having
Yeah.
all these operations, being constantly in the hospital, right? I mean, you literally lived in a hospital for
Right.
so much time.
Yeah, a lot of my life has been in the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'd never really thought about it before, but that was truly starting to give me my first experience with my own personal trauma
Right.
that I was really unaware of.
Yeah.
And as I think about it now, it's, really does have an impact on me. And I think about those times. I think the advantage I had is that as a child, I had learned to stay fairly composed and learned to regulate my nervous system. So I think I handled it probably better.
Yeah.
And I always describe it as if you had, think of trauma in terms of a weight that you carry around.
Right.
So if somebody's carrying around 150 pounds in a backpack on their back, which is all this
Right.
trauma, and then somebody comes along and says, here's another 10 pounds, right?
Right.
That could feel like 1,000 pounds at that point.
Right.
So I think I was better at handling it because of my earlier experiences,
Right.
but I was really truly experiencing some of that trauma,
Yeah.
right? And now, again, you're a high functioning kid, right?
Yeah.
Nobody saw it. No, but I mean, we look back on it now and we go,
Yeah.
there were some signs.
I was actually a very nervous child, but I don't think that I was constantly nervous, but I don't think I ever showed that.
You did in little ways, but we
Ever.
never picked up on it. I remember at nighttime you would be upstairs in your room, right? And then you would say you heard something, right? Or
Yeah.
and so you used to make me time how fast I could run from downstairs to your room, right?
I don't remember that.
Oh, you
That's
don't
so
remember that?
funny.
You just say, oh, and I'd say, okay, time me, right? And you would call my name, and then I'd go running up the stairs and say, look how fast I could get here. If there was something wrong, I could get here that fast, right?
Aw,
And,
you've always been like my superhero. But,
That's
yeah.
awesome. So those were the little signs,
Yeah.
that we never really picked up
I
on.
made you guys get an alarm system too.
Yep, alarm
like,
system.
Yeah.
All those kinds of things.
Very, very, yeah. It was trauma, but I also was an actress, right? So I was constantly on set, and I think that, I kind of played that role maybe, as a child too, like
Yeah.
that everything was okay and I was fine, and I wanted to be a grown-up too, So
Yeah.
I was always around grown-ups. So I wanted to be that grown-up, and I wanted to fit in.
Well, I think that was the whole thing too, is that because you were so positive as a child, like, I mean, you're just a beautiful child to have around our house, right? That you're always smiling, laughing, happy, right? We're not picking up that there's anything, right, underneath that.
Right.
And then the health, when you got the Crohn's, what they told us is take you off of gluten and dairy. Everything that they were telling us about Crohn's was you have to learn to manage and live and cope with it.
Well, and also they, have to have medication, and, the only route really is medication or surgery. I think it was, right?
Yeah. Well, what they said to us is there's no cure for Crohn's, right? We don't know what causes Crohn's, right? But she's just going to learn to have to live with it and take medication when it flares up.
Right.
And then eventually, so you went through 4 operations, right? 4 resections?
I believe so. I think that one of them was when my appendix ruptured too.
Yeah.
So my appendix ruptured. I was in, I think I was in the hospital for how long? Like a few weeks.
Oh, a few weeks, yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And then when I had the Crohn's, I've had, I think, 2 small bowel resections.
Yeah.
So 2 major surgeries. 24 inches of my intestines removed.
Yeah. So 24 inches. You can imagine that much being taken out. And what they told us was that eventually she'll just end up with a colostomy bag.
Yeah.
That was their answer.
Yeah.
And, because there was no cure that they knew of, right. For it. So we were trying to do everything we could do. Your mom researched like crazy, trying to find answers for you, and everything just kept coming back to the same thing: manage, live, cope with it.
Right.
And so you continued. I mean, she's a phenomenal actress. If you just see the stuff she's done, what are the kinds of things? What are the show? You started doing it when you were 4, right?
Yeah, I think it was like when I was about 4 years old. When I did Blood Knot with Patrick Dempsey and Margot Kidder. Patrick Dempsey played my brother. Margot Kidder was my mom. I played Ali Shady as a child, a bunch of other really well-known names as a child. Then I went out to LA.
Yep.
So
that was her dream, is to go to LA. So she went out there. Now, what we don't really understand is how significant stress is on Crohn's.
Yes.
And acting is a very stressful job.
It really is.
You really don't know, right, when, right, it'll flare up. So you're living, and I always talk about the number one fear for the human mind is uncertainty. That's the number one fear. So being uncertain about whether or not you could go on set and actually get through, right. would create stress.
Well, yeah, because I know that if I booked for a week, it was like, oh my gosh, am I going to get through this week and be okay?
Yep.
You know, because the worst thing in LA and Hollywood is to drop out of something. For them to be like, oh, she's sick, she can't come. You know, you don't want to do that. You look so unprofessional.
And you can't disclose it, because if you disclose it, they won't hire you.
Definitely can't disclose that.
So you can see where all this secrecy is coming in, right? Even as a child, she's hiding all the things that had happened to her as a child. So secrecy was a part of what you were doing. So it didn't seem unusual to keep the secret that you are sick.
Yeah.
Because that would affect your jobs.
Yeah. I don't think I told anybody. I think my agent might have known at one point, because I was in the hospital. I was in the ICU or something like that, and so they had to send flowers or something like that. But they definitely didn't want anybody to know either, right? It's just not something that you talk about in that kind of industry.
And you were doing really well. You're on a number of shows: Lost, CSI, ER, Without a Trace, right? A lot of really big shows. But then the sickness kept on coming, and then you lost your SAG insurance.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So we're dual citizens. We're from Canada, so we have Canadian and American citizenship. So you decided to go back up to Toronto because there's a lot of acting up there, and that way you have the insurance from up there.
Right.
Right. And so then we get a call saying that you've been admitted to the hospital, you're in ICU, your lungs started filling up with blood. You started coughing up blood. So tell us what happened there.
It was really scary. Actually, the first time that happened was when I was about 14. I was in a pool, and I remember swimming, and all of a sudden I felt like I was drowning. Like I couldn't breathe anymore. And all of a sudden just blood just started gushing out of my lungs. And that was when I was about 14 years old. That was the first time it ever happened. And I remember I went to the hospital, and then it stopped. And they were just like, that was the weirdest thing we've ever seen. We've never seen anything like that. And then when I was in Toronto, I don't remember much about it, but I just remember I woke up in the ICU, and then at that point they diagnosed me with a terminal illness called idiopathic pulmonary hemosiderosis.
Right.
And people with IPH don't generally live very long.
Yep.
There's only 10 of us in all of North America that actually have this, so it's super, super rare. And so they gave me about 5 years to live. I think.
Well, they said it could be up to, in 5 years, that could be, it could be terminal because of that.
Right.
And again, what they said was the only thing that we can recommend is that she lives near a hospital in case her lungs start filling up with blood.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so again, idiopathic, just the term idiopathic means no idea how it starts.
Right.
So it's unknown how it starts. So there was, again, no idea of why it started.
Right.
And there's no cure.
Right.
Right? So this is, again, another autoimmune disorder. So Crohn's is autoimmune. This is autoimmune. Your mom has Hashimoto's, which is another autoimmune.
Yeah.
So after you got this, IPH, that's when your mom said to me, because I was adopted, we didn't know my family history. So your mom came to me and said, this must be on you. This must be coming from your side. Because we don't know. We don't have anything like that on my side of the family. It must be coming from your side of the family.
Right.
And we didn't know my family history.
Right.
So she basically said, you need to figure this out or we're going to lose our daughter.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty serious thing. And that got my attention really fast.
Right.
Right? And again, now I'm talking about it and I'm going, that's another trauma.
Yeah.
Right? Knowing that your daughter could die.
Yeah.
Right? And
you're just so strong, you don't ever show that anything gets to you.
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Because I've seen you in some I think some situations that could be traumatic that you're just kind of like, I got this. I'm like, how does he do that? I mean, I understand it. I think I have some of that too, but you handle things really well.
Yeah, but it's still trauma. It's still coming from something. So, and again, recognizing it is the big thing and understanding it. So there's a lot of people out there that are dealing with things. And again, high functioning. I'm obviously pretty high functioning. You were high functioning. Your mom was high functioning. I work with CEOs and world famous athletes who are all dealing with this stuff. And so one of the things that we want to definitely talk about is there's no shame in it, right? We need to stop making people feel like there's something wrong with them, because the one thing that I say to everybody when they come in, and if you're my patient, you came in, the first thing I would say to you is, Ashley, there is nothing wrong with you.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with your mind.
Right.
Your mind is dealing with a series of glitches and error messages.
Right.
And so when I started to do this research, what I discovered is that when we have trauma, right, that like you had and people have, that creates inflammation in the body. The purpose of inflammation is to create a cell danger response so that the cells become protected while this danger is happening. And so I believe that it goes to the weakest genetic link in the body. So for you, that was your intestinal area.
Right.
So the inflammation, right, would not allow food to pass through the intestinal tract.
Right.
Because it became inflamed. So you couldn't eat, right? So you would lose weight.
Yeah.
You would be getting sicker. And what was really happening is that inflammation was compromising your immune system and your neurotransmitters.
Right.
So if you go in and you say, and you diagnose or you get diagnosed with Crohn's or anything like that, what they're really doing is they're saying, those are the symptoms, we're going to treat the symptoms.
Right.
But nobody was looking at the cause.
Right.
And I believe that the cause for you, I'm not saying everybody with Crohn's would have this, but I believe it's probably a major amount of people, the majority for sure, are dealing with unresolved trauma.
Well, yeah, I think this day and age, I don't think people talk about childhood abuse, or we don't open up about, sexual assaults or different, all sorts of things that happen to us. And we're not honest about those things, and we don't want to seek help, but there is help out there.
Right.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of shame about it, right?
Right.
And so a lot of times people will feel like there's something wrong with me, right? I'm broken, I'm defeated, because that's sort of what they're told. You're broken and you're defeated. What I didn't know is, even though that never happened to me as a child, I didn't know that all my friends were dealing with it.
Right.
We had 2 principals at our schools that were abusing kids, 2 teachers, the guy who ran our Little League for 35 years. All my friends were getting sexually, physically abused, even in their own homes. I had no idea that existed. That never ever occurred to me that could happen.
Wow.
And even the dysfunction with your mom's dad, I was just like, wow, this must be unusual. Right. It wasn't unusual.
Yeah.
It's happening in homes everywhere. And so many people that I see will come back and tell me that, yes, you were describing my father or my mother. Because when a child is growing up, you don't have, especially as you didn't have enough life experience to interpret what you were experiencing.
Right.
So you don't know how to articulate it. You don't know how to share it.
Right.
And so then that just keeps building up and churning, right? And keeping that inflammation active.
Right.
So what I talk about is what we're going to do in our program. The TIPP program is a 4-hour process that we take people through that is basically going to resolve that trauma loop. And the trauma loop is actually affected by memory. It's all coming down to the way we store the memory of trauma. That keeps the system in a constant activation state, in a cell danger response.
Right.
As long as that's looping, your Crohn's was never going to go away.
Right.
Because your mind thought that something is still happening.
Right.
The subconscious survival part of your brain is fully present in the moment all the time.
Right.
So your mind, even though you weren't in danger anymore, your mind didn't know you weren't in that danger, so it kept the inflammation active. because your subconscious mind is fully present in the moment.
Right.
So it stays inflamed. When we get the memory reset, and that's what we're going to do, is we reset the memory. When the memory gets reset, it stops the activation. And so I explain it really a simple way, and I'll use you as an example of it.
Okay.
So tell me what you had for dinner last night.
Oh gosh, what did I have for dinner? Pizza.
Pizza.
Yeah.
All right. So when I asked you that, you saw pictures, right?
Yeah.
Of what you ate, where you were at.
Yeah.
That's how you stored the information about dinner last night.
Right.
Now, last night wasn't threatening or disturbing. It may have been great pizza, right? But it wasn't.
Amazing pizza. We made it from scratch.
But it wasn't a threatening event.
Right.
When you were in a threatening event, similar to what happened to you as a child,
Right.
all your senses were heightened: sight, smell, hearing. So how's it going to record that? High definition, right? You're in the acting business, you know what high definition is.
Yeah.
So very bright, very intense, tremendous amounts of details put into it. That's what the mind keeps looking at. It then thinks something's happening.
Right.
So it activates a fight or flight response constantly,
Yeah.
right? So your mom, her Hashimoto's, that came from constantly producing cortisol because she was in a constant state of fight or flight, even though she wasn't in the same danger.
Right.
Her mind was looking at the old data, responding to it.
Right.
That's what we can fix in the 4 hours. What we're going to do is we're going to get your mind, we haven't done it with you, but the person's mind, to reset that high definition memory into the same format as to what you ate for dinner last night.
Interesting.
Then it stops calling for the action,
Right.
right? Because there's no threat seen anymore, no perceived threat any longer.
Right.
So that's what we're going to do, and that's what the whole program is designed to do. And none of this would have happened if you didn't experience what you experienced.
Amazing.
Now, I would never in a million years ever want you to have to do that. If we could change that, I would love to have changed it, but I can't change it.
And now you're saving so many lives, right? All these
So
these
many.
beautiful stories of all of these people that have, been searching and searching for answers for so long.
Yep.
And suffering. There's so many people suffering out there with trauma, unresolved trauma, when there's actual help out there.
This is a cutting edge neuroscience approach to it.
Right.
We're basically rebooting the brain,
Amen.
right?
Yeah.
And so you look at, had you not experienced what you experienced, and again, we wish never happened,
Yeah.
right? Nothing we
That'd
can
be
do,
nice.
right? So those
But
are.
it's over.
But it's over. There you
Hey.
go. Oh, she's learned. She knows the program.
Yeah.
Right? Where is it? Doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
Right? There's no
Yeah.
such thing as that event anymore. It's just
Yeah.
information about the event.
Right.
But the information, if it keeps looping in high definition, will keep the activation of the nervous system going.
Right.
So it's not meant, your fight or flight response is an emergency management system. It's designed to turn on when there's a threat
Right.
and turn off when there's no longer a threat. So that's how it works for the animal world, and it works very efficiently.
Right.
Right? So if an animal is in a threatening situation, they will go into an activation response. As soon as the event is over, they've escaped, right? It stops,
Right.
right? Perfectly designed system. We have the exact same system, but we added a whole bunch of explicit details about these events and experiences.
Yeah.
And so we have so many great experiences with people that we've helped. Again, and I give you all the credit, because had this not happened, had you not been able to tell us what you experienced and what happened, we never would have known how to do this. So
Yeah.
you're the hero.
Hey.
So let's take a look at, there was a young lady when she was 15 years old. Her mom was up in Ohio, and she sent me a message. And we knew this family from 25 years ago, but she sent me a message, a 911, that her daughter, they found a suicide note from her daughter, 15-year-old daughter. And so her mom called me and said, "Can you see her?" And I said, "Well, you're in Ohio. I mean, we're in Florida." She says, "I don't care. If you can see her, I will get her in the car right now and drive down." And she did. And so she drove down. We took her through we cleared the table for her to make sure that we had everything ready. And so when she came in, we took her through the program. And a year later, she wrote on Facebook, she goes, "A year ago, I wanted to take my own life. And then my mom brought me down to see Dr. Wood, and I had a reason to live again.
Oh,
And now, this is a few years later, she has her own baby.
yeah, she just had a baby, right?
Yep.
That's
yep.
so cool.
So we see her on Facebook, and we still stay friends with them. We have so many, people like that.
Yeah.
Another great story is Michelle. All right, and you'll see her on our website. Michelle shares her story. She was 17 years in very active addiction.
Right.
I mean, pretty much everything you can imagine.
And such a sweetheart too, right?
Oh, she's a beautiful
Such a
human
sweetheart.
being.
Yeah.
And again, what I said to her is, I said, Michelle, you must have experienced a lot of trauma, because there's no way you would be doing these things, right? Unless you had experienced trauma. She goes, I've had a lot of trauma. So we were able to take her out of that trauma, got that loop to stop. And so, like I said, she had lost her daughter. The courts took her daughter away. Her family pretty much disowned her. They didn't want to have anything to do with her. 17 years since she was 16 until she was 33, and she came in to see us. She had OD'd twice.
Wow.
And so when she came in to see us, we took her through the program, and I have to hand it to Michelle. She did exactly what we asked her to do. She
really
followed
did.
everything.
She followed the protocol.
She really wanted her daughter back.
Yeah.
And the great news is she has her daughter back. She's been out of addiction for well over maybe 3.5 years now. Yeah. She's working full time. Just a miraculous story. Just a beautiful young lady and enjoying life. Reconciled with her family, which was beautiful, right? And so all of that came because of the program that was developed because of you, right? Yeah. And there's other stories. So, there's some of those, like with addiction, what I always talk about with addiction is not about character, morals, or ethics.
Not at all.
It's about pain.
Yeah.
Right? It's all about pain.
Yeah.
And so people want to stop pain. Pain is a very strong motivator to stop.
Yeah.
And so the mind wants to be out of pain, so it finds a resource to stop the pain.
Right.
And the part of the brain that does that is the survival brain. Mm-hmm. And that's fully present in the moment. So when does it want pain to stop?
No.
Now.
Right.
When the person takes the drug, right, takes the alcohol, whatever, when does the pain stop?
No.
Now.
Yeah.
Problem solved. It doesn't see consequences to it. So if you're dealing with relatives or people that you know that you love that are in active addiction, right, having an understanding of why the brain does what it does will really help you to help them.
It's not because they're a bad person, right?
No.
It doesn't make them bad people. It just makes them, people that have probably been through maybe stuff like, I went through that I didn't want to talk about.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
And we just want to cover up that pain and that suffering.
Yep.
So.
And that's what they're dealing with. So that pain is constantly looping and activating them. They found a resource to stop it.
Right.
And so it doesn't mean anything about their character or willpower. I used to think it was.
Right.
Because as everybody knows, I've never had a drink in my life, never touched a drug in my life, right? But I didn't have that pain.
Right.
If I'd have had that pain, how would I have done it differently?
Exactly.
Right? So fortunate for me, right, that was my life story. Mm-hmm. And so again, we got so many stories. The other one, I work with CEOs, executives, world-class athletes. The program is really built around performance, which is really different because we don't focus much on the trauma. As you know, when you go through the program, we don't spend a lot of time on trauma. It's more about the solution, right? And how are we going to get you to perform at your highest level?
Yeah.
So when I work with athletes or CEOs, they're dealing with the same issues, the anxiety, maybe post-traumatic stress, but because they're functioning at such a high level, people don't associate that they're having the same issues. Mm-hmm. So we had a young girl come in, she was 16, her mom said she doesn't know what's going on, her anxiety is really bad, she's a runner at her school, she ran cross country, but she was literally passing out during the races.
Wow. And
they were like, what is going on? They tested her, they couldn't figure anything out. It was really coming from some of the things that she had been dealing with. And she's a young 16-year-old girl. And so anyway, we take her through the program. She ends up breaking her school records. She gets a full ride scholarship for cross country. We got a great picture of her standing with her arms spread with all her medals on her arm, right? And she actually wrote her letter for her admission to the college talking about, had she not done this, she doesn't know whether or not she could have accomplished what she accomplished.
Wow.
What was wrong with her?
Nothing.
Right? It's just how especially children, the brain doesn't fully develop until we're 25.
Oh, wow.
Right? So a lot of that development is also interfering and creating some glitches and error messages.
Right.
So we've got all kinds of examples of that. Another 16-year-old girl, her father brought her in from Atlanta. She had attempted suicide 2 times. And I had her father sit in with me on the beginning part of the session to explain to him. I said, I don't believe she was trying to die. She was trying to stop the pain.
Right.
And then when he looked at it, he says, that makes a lot of sense, because as soon as she attempted the suicide, she called us right away.
Right.
She didn't want to die. She just didn't know how to deal with the pain.
Right.
So the good news is we took her through the program. She's doing great. I talk to her father periodically once in a while, and he says, well, this sort of happened. And I said, well, also remember what's typical teenage behavior, right? We're not going to make them perfect, right? We're just going to stop some of the pain.
Right.
And if we stop that pain, then they can act like a typical teenager and still do dumb stuff, right? But at least they can do dumb stuff that's not going to hurt them.
Right.
So we've got a lot of great examples. I think hopefully you've learned something here in this podcast. We'd like to share some more wisdom with you if you want. So first of all, how did we come up with the name You Must Be Out of Your Mind, right? Well, we came out of that because that's the title of the first book that I wrote, called You Must Be Out of Your Mind.
Really great book.
It talks about the whole, just what we were talking about, how we developed the program, why I developed the program, stories about people that have gone through the program.
Incredible stories.
Some really great stories, some really good things. So if you're listening to this podcast, we're going to put up on a link that you can click on that link, and you're going to get you can download a free copy of the whole book. Because I think if you read the book, a lot of people go,
you can download a free copy?
Download a free copy.
That's amazing.
So it's all yours, and you can maybe read through it. A lot of people, when they read this book, say, you were talking to me. That story about that person was me.
Awesome.
Right? That story was my wife. Right? So hopefully you'll do that. If you want more information, you can even call us. We're going to post up our number on there as well, but just so you know, it's you can call and talk to somebody about how the program works and how you can we have different ways of delivering it. We have an online version of the 4-hour program, which you go through in the privacy of your own home or with a facilitator, or you can come and see me one-on-one. We do that as well. Yeah. We also do some groups. We're working on some retreats now and groups to bring people in. Yeah. I've done this with 40, 50, even 140 people in the room. That's the same 4-hour program. Yeah. And people will say it was life-changing.
Yeah, completely life-changing.
Yep. So that's our goal for you. So the phone number, if you want to call, is 407-600-2438. And we'll post that up there as well. The website is the inspiredperformanceinstitute.com, or you can go to GetTIPP, GetTIPP.com, and that also brings you. So GetTIPP, that's the name of the program. So any closing remarks, any other thoughts, Ashley?
No, I would recommend this to anyone. I mean, the stories of people that have, gone through things and gone through the program and how their lives have changed in such beautiful ways is just incredible. So.
And I tell you, when we work with athletes, we have people who have broken world records, won tournaments. You just go on our site and you'll see a lot of and that's happening in days, right? So when the mind resets, what actually happens, especially I love working with athletes because it's so easy to see the accomplishments very quickly. Right. But what happens is that when we have unresolved trauma, it affects the mitochondria, the ATP, which is the energy within the cell. Yeah. When we release the trauma, we release that extra energy. Yeah. So we have people going out and breaking world records 2 days after, winning world championships, winning golf tournaments, right?
Amazing stories.
Yeah, because that energy now is available. So we're not making them better athletes. They were already great athletes. Right. We just gave them that little extra edge. Yeah. So hopefully we can do the same for you. If you're interested, you've got the number, you've got the website, give us a call. This was so great to do this as our first, right? Yeah, it's awesome. We're going to try to make every other podcast just as good, right? I don't know if we'll excel or beat it, right? But we'll bring in some really great guests,
Yeah.
and we're going to be announcing more and more guests that'll be coming in, and they'll be talking about what they talk about, and we'll connect it up to what we do, and I think you'll get a lot of benefit out of it. So thank you again. I love you.
Thank you. I love you so much.
And I'm so glad that, and we never talked about it. How is your Crohn's? Do you have Crohn's anymore?
No.
Do you have a lung disorder anymore?
Nope.
There we go. And there it is.
People say to me, I sabotage myself. And what I say to them, it's impossible. Nobody can sabotage themselves. The brain is not capable of sabotage. It's a survival brain. It's trying to protect you. It may move you into a direction that looks like sabotage, but it's not sabotage. I'm going to be taking you through the process that I developed to help people perform at a higher level.